VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. I am back from Los Angeles. An unsuccessful trip Vikings-wise because the Vikings lost to the Rams with a poor defensive outing. Would they lose, let's see, 30-20? Was that the final score? No good. I did get to go to Lakers-Suns the next night and sit 4 rows from courtside, so that was a very nice consolation because the Lakers are 3-0 if you care about them or you were a LeBron guy or gal like me. But arguably the worst part of Thursday altogether, the loss be damned, we'll see if the Vikings' playoff fate is decided by one win or loss, was Christian Darrisaw's torn ACL and MCL. So he won't be back this season, and the Vikings will have to pivot. Week 8 for the Vikings in back-to-back seasons have been unkind. Last Week 8 of 2023, Kirk Cousins tore his Achilles, and that was that on the Vikings season. They at least made it fun, Josh Dobbs mania, but ended up missing the postseason. This season, they're in a better spot at 5-2 now. They lose their best offensive lineman, probably their second best player on the whole, and now we'll figure out if this 5-2 cushion is enough to propel them to at least a wild card playoff berth. I know we're kind of in the doldrums right now of 2 losses in a row, so I don't even think the NFC North feels winnable anymore, although the schedule does lighten up, and if the Vikings get hot again, the sky is the limit. So what do we do without Darrisaw? What does life without Darrisaw look like? I have about 4 options here I want to go through, and per usual, I like to rank these things. So if you're contemplating, shit, all right, now what? Darrisaw's out. Is the season cooked? These are some of the contingency plans that the Vikings could hatch. Conveniently, they have 8 days until a trade deadline if they realize their in-house options aren't fancy enough. So that the timing is decent there. But here we go. I'm going to start at the bottom of my list, what I consider probably the least likely or the least appropriate to combat the Christian Darrisaw injury, and we'll work our way up to number 1 to the most likely. So number 4, like I said, the trade deadline is Election Day. Go vote, people. And the Vikings then have that amount of time to figure out if they want to spend some of their draft capital, which isn't much, next April, but then they have the full cabinet of 2026 to get a Darrisaw replacement via trade. There are some names that are theoretically on the block, like Walker Little from the Jacksonville Jaguars, who their season is swirling down the tubes. Max Mitchell from the Jets is allegedly on the block. And then a dude named Nicholas Petit-Ferre from Tennessee Titans, although I don't know if he would be any amount of an upgrade. So just like any position right now, with 8 days before the deadline, the Vikings have options. I just had this one ranked so low for 2 reasons. I don't know if they would make a splashy tackle trade, because it kind of comes down to whether or not Kwesi Adofo-Mensah thinks this team is a bona fide Super Bowl contender. If they were 7-0, maybe they would go see how they can upgrade to get into January, maybe February. But they don't need a tackle long term, so it kind of reduces or dampens the enthusiasm for, hey, let's trade our 4th from 2026 for this sweet tackle who can then start. They probably won't do a Hawkinson-type trade for a tackle because they've got their 2 in-house. So that one to me is unlikely, but I have it at the bottom of the list for full disclosure. There's also some free agents if they realize that David Quesenberry isn't very good. Quesenberry's actually played quite well when the Vikings have called upon him in back-to-back seasons. You might recall Brian O'Neill was injured for a little bit last year, and now Darrisaw against the Rams. And Quesenberry, I think he has like 30-something snaps on offense so far this year and has like a 68 PFF grade. And let me tell you what, if Quesenberry can sustain a 68.0 PFF grade, we'll take it. You know, you can't get greedy after your second-best player tears his knee all to hell. So I don't know, though, if Quesenberry's 68.0 PFF is sustainable. If it's not, and they realize that, there's no deadline for free agency. David Bakhtiari is still out there. He hasn't played in quite some time, but he should know the Vikings operation pretty well, facing them twice per year for, a decade? Charles Leno, another guy that should be familiar with the Vikings from Bears fame. A sort of hometown. He's from South Dakota. A familiar face in Riley Reef. He's getting old, but he's a free agent. And then Donovan Smith, who used to be the Chiefs. Ooh, was he on the left or right side? I think he was the left tackle. So there's probably more popular free agent tackles available than there are throwaway OTs that you would trade for at the deadline. So that leads me to believe that a free agent signing would be more likely, and they'd have to look into Bakhtiari to figure out if he still has some stuff left in the tank. But these are the options if they realize what they have in-house is not favorable. The trades, Walker Little, Max Mitchell, and then the free agents, Bakhtiari, Charles Leno, Riley Reiff, Donovan Smith. Those are the extraneous options. Now we'll get into the more realistic stuff. So that's number 4, the trades and free agents. Number 3 is the rookie game plan. I don't think you'd see this one like on Sunday Night Football or anything, but on this show we've had Walter Rouse, and he was a 6th rounder from Oklahoma for these Vikings back in April. Really cool dude. I invite you to go back and watch that episode. But here's the deal. Pro Football Focus considered Walter Rouse like one of the best offensive tackles, I think, per pass blocking in the country last year, which would usually, get your which would usually get your draft stock higher than the 6th round. But for the life of me, I could never quite understand why Rouse kind of felt like a throwaway 6th rounder for these Vikings and for the league on the whole. But according to PFF, the guy can ball. We saw a little bit of him in the preseason. I think that was passable. But he like if something happens to Quesenberry here Sunday night or the week after, Rouse would be like the next man up. So he is basically the new Quesenberry if you assume Quesenberry gets the start. The cool part about a rookie is you could be sitting on an unpolished gym, and, not that he would take over Darrisaw O'Neal's job, but he might have the special sauce to do the thing. But I don't know. It's really tricky to. You're looking at the rosy upside of somebody who comes from the 6th round. It's kind of like during training camp and preseason when you're looking at your favorite team's roster and you're like, Tristan Jackson, that guy can ball. Like every single guy, like Taki Taimani, Bo Richter, every guy seems sweet as hell in July and August, and then reality hits in September and you hardly ever see them in games. That's kind of how I think we are with Rouse right now. It's the upside potential, the sweet Pro Football Focus. But he would be, to me, the 3rd in-line option, and he's going to be really close to game time if something happens to Brian O'Neill or David Quesenberry. So number 4, bottom of the list, trades and free agents. Number 3, Walter Rouse, the rookie. Number 2, I think this one would probably be the selection if you polled fans and said which scenario would you like. I think this one would win. Blake Brandel was drafted by the Vikings in 2020 to play tackle. And out of nowhere, it felt like last year, was it this offseason? No, I think it was last year. They were like, you know what, homie, you're a guard now. And he's like, sure, I can do that. And he's played pretty well through 7 games. He has a 60-something PFF. And I think he's nestled in nicely. A couple penalties he needs to clean up at left guard. He even took Dalton Reisner's job at left guard. And so if they need Brandel to be versatile and switch back to his roots of a tackle, well, that's kind of an option now because you're without Darrisaw for the next, probably year. Hopefully he'll be ready for the start of the season, but because the Vikings notoriously now slow roll injuries, I don't know if Darrisaw will be ready for week 1, but that's a different show that we'll discuss all offseason. But in this scenario where you have OG and OT versatility for Brandel, you have the option then to slide Brandel. This is not a foreign experience. It's not like you're switching Bryant McKinney to, a guard or something. This is telling Brandel, go back to what you used to do, and we'll put you at left tackle. And then at left guard, you'd have Dalton Reisner. That's his lifelong position. Center Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, bless his heart, at right guard. And then right tackle Brian O'Neill, who suddenly becomes the best offensive lineman that the Vikings have, which used to be, our slogan in 2019 and 2020. So the Brandel plan is sexy because you don't have to reteach the guy a new position. This becomes, I think, the second best option to the Vikings. And this is just really convenient because Dalton Reisner is on the cusp of returning, if not, already on deck for Sunday Night Football. Side note, nothing to do with the offensive line. One really sweet caveat of this week, in a week of bad news, was TJ Hawkinson's activation. Because Darrisaw was lost late Thursday night, Friday when Vikings.com announced that Hawkinson has been activated and will debut on Sunday Night Football, we were all kind of like, oh, All right, I guess. And 2 weeks ago, we would have been like, yeah, Hawkins is back. We're going to go to 6-0 and 7-0. So don't let Darrisaw's unfortunate injury totally fade your enthusiasm, because TJ Hawkinson coming back to this offense is humongous. The Detroit Lions admitted openly after they beat the Vikings in Week 7 that their game plan was you just shut down Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison or contain them, and you're going to win the game. And that's what they did. If another team, or the Lions in Week 18, or in the postseason, if another team tries that strategy, fine. But you will have Hawkinson in the middle of the field who should get about 12 targets. He usually gets 8 or 9 in a game like that. He'd be the primary receiver. So that's a side note about a return to health in the wake of Darrisaw's exodus. All right, the number one most realistic option for these Vikings after Darrisaw's injury is you merely promote David Quesenberry and hope for the best. I think that's what they'll do. It could really go either way with that Brando plan. But what has David Quesenberry done to not warrant an audition to start? He was their plan in the spring, the plan in the summer, and then through 7 weeks of the regular season, he was their primary go-to backup tackle. Adversity has struck. Darrisaw is out. Why would you need to go sign Bakhtiari? Why would you need to start Walter Rouse or switch Brandel over if you've trusted this guy with the next in line to Darrisaw for 10 months or so? So it's cool to have that Brandel contingency plan to fall back on, switch him over to tackle. But if I think you have to see from Quesenberry how good he is or isn't until you make that switch. That's my personal prediction. I think I was at the Atlanta Falcons game last year during Josh Dobbs' mania. I think, is that when Brian O'Neill got hampered? And I think Quesenberry came in and looked pretty good. And then he did the same, looked pretty decent against the Rams. So I think, to me, the fairest option and the most realistic right now is you just keep Quesenberry at that left tackle spot. And although he is a significant downgrade from Darrisaw, who isn't, you got to give him a look, and I think that's how it'll go. So recap these. All right, trade candidates or free agent would probably be at the bottom of the list of most likely outcomes. David Bakhtiari, though, is intriguing if he still has some gas left in the tank. Walter Rouse, don't forget about him. He was drafted for a reason. Perhaps he has the gumption to thrive as a starting tackle. Blake Brandel, versatility, switching him over to left tackle while conveniently welcoming back Reisner at his LG spot. Or if that's all just fodder, we don't need any of that shit, then you have Quesenberry, who's been your contingency plan for multiple months. All right, that's all I got personally on this Darrisaw show today. I think for tomorrow we're going to tentatively chat with Brevin Bain and Coda Spitfire about reasons to remain optimistic about these Vikings, reasons why this isn't guaranteed to be like 2016 or 2003 where the bottom falls out. I want to pick their brains on that. I think they're on tap to chat with me soon. All right, that's all I got. Welcome to, what are we at, Week 9. The Vikings are 7-point favorites over the Colts. Skol, baby.